and welcome to our webinar today on legislative and regulatory updates. My name is Laura Cook. I'm the director of the Financial Crime Resource Center here at the National Center. We're so happy to have you, and I'm going to do a little bit of introduction and background on our organization and then introduce you to our esteemed presenters. So the National Center for Victims of Crime was started a little over 30 years ago, and our mission is to forge a national commitment to help victims of crime rebuild their lives. We have multiple programs, and one of them is the Financial Crime Resource Center. And our Financial Crime Resource Center was started just a few years ago because we saw a gap in services to victims of financial crime. And financial crime can be just as devastating as other crimes, and we wanted to do something to help advocate for those victims. We help them try to recover their assets and gain control over their lives by doing a lot of advocacy work and partnering with organizations like Wells Fargo Advisors, who is bringing this webinar to you today. With we have Ron Long, who is the Senior Vice President and Director of Regulatory Affairs and Elder Client Initiatives at Wells Fargo Advisors. He works with key businesses and support units to help them stay abreast of the changing regulatory environment and issues related to the aging client. He assists the firm by frequently meeting with securities regulators, adult protective services, and others impacting the brokerage industry and elder clients. Since 2006, Ron has taken a leading role in the securities industry in reviewing how it engages its older clients. Prior to current position, Ron worked in Wachovia Securities Legal Department starting in June 2002. Before joining Wachovia Securities, Ron was District Administrator of the Securities and Exchange Commission's Philadelphia District Office from March 1997 to June 2002. He joined SEC staff in 1990 as an attorney in the Division of Enforcement, and in 1994 he assumed the position of counselor to Chairman Arthur Levitt. Ron started his legal career as an associate with the San Jose, California law firm of Hodge, Fenton, Jones & Appel, Incorporated. He was a graduate of Williams College and received his law degree from Georgetown University Law Center. I also have Andrew Hartnett, and he is Commissioner of Securities for the State of Missouri and Secretary of State Jason Kander's office. As Commissioner, he directs the activities of the Enforcement, Examination, and Registration sections and serves as the statutory adjudicator in administrative enforcement actions filed by the Securities Division. Here's the Broker-Dealer section and the Investment Advisor Cybersecurity and Technology Project Group. He's the chair of NASSA's Enforcement Section. He also sits on NASSA's Board Committee on Senior Issues and Diminished Capacity. Prior to being appointed Commissioner of Securities, he worked in the Missouri Attorney General's office, first as an Assistant Attorney General in the Consumer Protection Division, and then as Chief of Staff General Chris Koster. He began his legal career at Bryan Cave LLP and is a graduate of St. Louis University School of Law, New York University with an MA in French Studies, and Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. We have Lisa Blyer, who is a SIMFA Managing Director and Associate General Counsel who focuses on retirement and savings issues, including senior investor issues. Previously, Ms. Blyer held positions as Vice President and Senior Counsel at the American Bankers Association and as a Legislative Assistant for Congresswoman Marge Rukema. Ms. Blyer has been published in Trust and Investment magazine, having authored Overhauling ERISA's Forte's Marketplace and The State of Play for Today's Directed Trustee. Ms. Blyer is a JD from the University of Pittsburgh Law School and a BA from the University of Michigan. And with that, I will turn it over to our presenters to start the webinar.
Hello, our presenter muted.
Sorry about
There we
that.
go. No worries.
So I'm Long here from Wells Fargo Advisors. I thought I would take a few minutes to go through some of the basics of how we are approaching this issue as an entire industry, you you'll have a regulator from Missouri who can talk about the approach from the regulatory standpoint, and an industry leader in Lisa Blyer can talk about the broad industry approach. But I did want to talk about the environment, as many of the attendees on the are that this area of elder financial abuse is one that's a growing area. We don't have anywhere near the statistics, the hard statistics that we'd like, but the guesstimates are the crime is in the billions, and is one financial institutions actually can play a greater role. I can tell you that in the medical profession, your psychologists, social workers, they've been seeing this issue have more of an ability and skill set to work through some challenges, but we financial institutions have seen it, but there's been a training that we had to go through to get our official securities or industry licenses that lets us be aware of these challenges. We see as it comes in the door, and I will say over the last 5 to 7 years, we've been able to talk more and more with folks in the adult protective area, mainly APS, some of the psychologists, some of the researchers in there about what it is that we on the financial front lines, what we can do, we can try and achieve in stopping these problems earlier, sooner, or once we do run into a problem, seeking the right assistance.
I'm going to jump in there. Ron, let me just jump in for a quick second and just talk about, I'm just going to add in to what you're saying about how we're not medical professionals, right? So we don't have some of the same expertise that many of the folks on this call might have. But some of what we see might be something that's different, that because we have a relationship that is built on somebody who maybe regularly comes into one of our offices or our branch offices. And so we might see something that somebody who is asking the same thing over and over again, or providing a direction. And Ron's going to talk a little bit, touch on some of those, what we call our red flags or things that we use to identify. But because we don't have the medical expertise, we're kind of looking at this from a banking and advisor perspective, which are sometimes some different ways to see things, but we see things that just don't fly with the way that they've been interacting with us previously.
And I think that is a good point. As you see in the title of our program, we're talking about having this issue of elder financial abuse, having it be something that both on the financial end, practitioners in the elder space see from the social worker, psychological, and medical, but then having actual legislative approaches to deal with these problems. If we go talk a little bit about some of the current considerations, though, when you end those other parts, we do have some challenges that we have to face. One is a big one, which is that we tend to see family members as the primary exploiters of many of these victims of elder financial abuse. If we get to the next slide, you'll see that we talk about the concern of the third-party fraud, and we do have those folks of lotteries or the friendly prints or organic involvement, and that's out there, and third-party fraud is important as well. But the challenge comes in when it is that person within the family orbit that is engaging in the exploitation. One challenge is that comes up when you're trying to think about possible legislative or regulatory changes that can help address this problem is the issue of privacy. The nature of financial services is the mere fact that I even have an account at Wells Fargo Advisors or an institution is private information to be shared with anyone absent some sort of exemption or exception. So we have to work through those challenges of when we see something, whether it's in the exploitation area or has hinted at what I would call the self-exploitation, the clients beginning to suffer the or diminished capacity, and that being a cause of potential financial losses to clients.
Should we talk a little bit, though, about some of what we see, some of the cognitive, some of the ones we see, what cognitive might look like and what financial exploitation could happen to some of that? Because I like to make that distinction that we've got, places where we see that we can step in and possibly be of help. There's a cognitive situation where, even though we're not doctors, but there are things we see. I've made mention that when things are changing from when somebody's making the same request over and over again, or they call and going to they make a decision with their funds that is not going to well serve that person, whether it's something like some type of investment that is for a 30-year bond at an elder age, at an 80-year-old age. That makes sense, and you're kind of wondering if there's something more going on there. There's that set, and then there's that other set, which is the third-party fraud, which actually, and there was a New York State study actually done by APS, I believe, in New York State, which showed that 67% of fraud actually family members. And so sometimes we're the ones who see those because someone comes in and is requesting money to go towards towards the birth, towards the person who cuts their lawn, towards the sweetheart scams, the Nigerian scams, all those various scams. But we can see those in that somebody who's directing their money there. And so, it's something that we see just because of the situation we're in holding on to somebody's finances.
Let's get into the third bullet there, Lisa, because there is still the self-determination of the elderly person. Just because I've turned 81 doesn't automatically make me someone whom you, financial institution, you, adult protective services, or whatever other agency there might be, don't necessarily get to substitute your judgment of what I should do simply because of my age. For example, if I decide to take $10,000 and go play bingo in Atlantic City, I'm sure that's the role of an agency or a financial institution to say, no, you can't have your money to go play bingo. On the other hand, if it's that same $10,000, and my friend, the Nigerian prince, says, send it to me because I share $20 million that I'm trying to sneak out of the country, I do think that's a role that perhaps the financial institution, the adult protective services agencies, or other social services folks should be able to step in and make assist this elderly person in managing their money. A difficult area to navigate, and even more difficult when you look to your state regulators or legislators to come up with rules to try to assist in that area. So why don't I try and segue over to Andrew Hart with the Missouri Security Commission to talk through some of the regulatory and legislative changes that have come from the states on this issue.
All right. Well, thank you, Ron. And thank you as well for inviting me to do this. So when we started for those that don't know, the state securities regulators are sort of like state-level SEC. That's kind of not really a great way of describing it because, there's lots of stuff that the Securities and Exchange Commission does on a federal level that we are preempted out of doing. But it really has a securities division that does a variety of things, but one of the things that we do are enforcement actions where someone has been the victim of investment fraud. And since 2008, among my sister states, that's not really a great way to put that, but state securities regulators who track victim age, roughly 1/3 of the enforcement actions that we have done, the cases that we've brought have involved senior victims. So this is something that we are seeing an awful lot of. So we started looking at a way of, okay, how can we do this legislatively? How can we work with some of the firms that we regulate to try to finish some of this exploitation that's going on? And so we started thinking about what our goals would be and how we'd want to go about doing that. The two things that really kept coming back to us were, first, we wanted to keep the money in the account. It's just really important because, in general, once it gets out, you're getting it back. We see all sorts of enforcement cases in my office where, someone took, they said they were going to give a 10% return, they were going to invest it in their business, whatever the case may be. Inevitably, that money was spent on at a Mistar, on Facebook tickets, on a mortgage, in any event, it's been spent. And so keeping the money in the account seemed really important. Really important in a way that, maybe you keep in the account and then you figure out, what, this is actually a disbursement that we want to allow. That 2-day delay than to see $50,000 go to the Jamaican lottery scam or something like that. So that's one of the big goals, was to keep the money in the account. And this one was to bring the exploitation to light. And obviously, I don't mean bring the exploitation to light in a way of shaming people or anything like that, but experts want to isolate the victim, to make them dependent upon the one committing the exploitation, so they're not caught, so that they can continue to exploit them. For all those reasons, isolation helps them. And so we wanted to try to provide pathways to combat that isolation. Here, this really ties back to something that Ron and Lisa were just talking about, which is, you have the same set of circumstances, and they can be, or you're looking at the same set of circumstances, and without knowing all of the facts, they might well exploitation, they might not, right? Ron used a relatively easy example of gambling in New Jersey or Las Vegas or whatever, and clearly should have the right to go do that. I'm with Ron. I clearly don't think that we want to let people just willy-nilly send their money to known scams. But, when you start getting relationships with huge age differences, for example, that's a lot harder to figure out what's going on. Is that a perfectly, both parties are perfectly happy and they're in it for the right reasons, and that we all let that go forward, the right to make whatever decision they want there? Or is that something where someone is suffering from some diminished capacity and is taken advantage of, is being slowly isolated from their family? Both of those circumstances exist, and so it's really hard to try to craft a rule that has that's specific on that stuff, and that's why, again, one of the goals was just to sort of bring the underlying exploitation to light so that experts can get it and make sure that people don't get hurt. Okay, I'm going to get back on my outline now. So one of the things I wanted to chat about briefly here was, what my work with the financial firms, and they were just sort of talking about some of this from their perspective. But for perspective, first of all, the money is there. So in terms of the goal of keeping the money in the account, that's sort of pretty obviously. But it's also one of the places that isolated victims are most likely to surface. You have a talented, odd to call an exploiter talented, but someone is very effective in that way. A lot of the friends have been cut off. There aren't going to be that many places that the victim, for lack of a better word, surfaces. But a bank or a brokerage office to get money is one of those places where they're likely to surface. And so, as Ron and Lisa were mentioning, it really makes a lot of sense to work with for regulators and the financial services industry to work together here. So one other thing I just want to mention before we get into talking about what actually happened is that one of the things that you have to get used to when you're thinking about some of these laws is that you're refusing to do something that a senior client asks you to do, right? The Missouri Senior Savings Protection Act, which is the first bullet there, it immunizes a firm when they have reasonable suspicion that senior exploitation is occurring to disburse the requested funds, to hold this funds account to 10 business days. And at that point, the reason why we did that is, I think, pretty obvious. It's to try to get to that goal of keeping the money in the account. So business days, the firm has to, in order to benefit from this immunity, the firms to inform everyone who is on the account, and then they also have to tell office, the securities division, and they have to tell our state APS division, the Department of Health and Senior Services. And so again, going back to those two goals, keep the money in the account, bring the exploitation to light, go ahead and delay the disbursement when you think that it's going somewhere it shouldn't go, and tell my office and the state APS so that we can get involved and try to stop the exploitation. We were not quite the first state to do something like this, but we were pretty close. I remember if Washington definitely came first. I can't remember if Delaware beat us by a little bit or we beat Delaware, but we're one of the first. But you're starting to see more and more states adopting some version of this the kind of senior protection legislation.
Andrew, you're being a little modest, so I'll speak for you. One of the things that Missouri has done that no other state does do, which I think is critical in this area, is they allow a financial service firm having that report to APS and to Andrew's office. They allow us to reach out to a trusted family member, and particularly in a circumstance where the senior may not have had that family member's name to the account. So Missouri, if we suspect fraud, we call that daughter in Dallas or the son in Seattle, not to talk details about the account, but we've got serious concerns with your mom, I need you to fly back to St. Louis. If we dementia or diminished capacity, once again, we can tell to that family member, we need you to step in, come home, check in on your mother, check in on your dad, and we'll have immunity for breach of privacy in Missouri if they take that step. I think it's an exceptionally important feature as we go through more state laws and federal laws. It's something I think that would be critical to see in more states.
Thanks, Ron. It looked like that there's a question about, the application of the law. In Missouri, it is provisions apply if you're 60 and over, because that was the age that was used in several other Missouri statutes, as well as it's a federal statute, but it's escaping me right now. And then the other way in which these sections would apply would be if you were subject to state APS law. So in other words, if you were kind of disabled. So I think the question was sort of if you had that early onset Alzheimer's, you're in the early 50s or something like that, but you are starting to lose your faculties, and that's gonna. I have to look again at the precise definition of the state APS law to see if that would fall within that sort of disabled definition or not. So that's better, at least in Missouri. Okay, maybe Ron, I'd triggered you again. So starting to see, though, more of these state laws, in part because NASSA, which is not the base agency, unfortunately, that would make me a phenomenally interesting speaker on this webinar, but the North American Securities Administrators Association, which is sort of the national organization of state securities regulators, also includes the Canadian provinces and Mexico securities regulator, but that's not relevant today, has propounded a model law on this topic. And this is, again, that's where I got that 1/3 statistic I gave you earlier. That's compiled by NASSA. They have a senior committee, an advisory committee that SIFMA and Ron serve on to try to help us respond appropriately. Here again, the model law allows to delay disbursements from the account when they suspect financial exploitation. This one goes for 15 business rather than 10, and it'd be extended a little bit more easily than the one in Missouri can. In Missouri, you have to go to a judge, and MARD is going to be able to extend it. It also requires firms like Wells Fargo to provide access to records to law enforcement and state APS as they're conducting their investigations. It also a mandatory reporting provision, where in Missouri you're sort of required to report after you have elected to delay disbursement, and the NASSA model law has a broader mandate there. I think, Ron, Lisa, am I missing anything? I think that's large.
I think those are the basics, as I probably hinted at earlier. I'm a little concerned with the NASSA model that they don't let you out when the senior hasn't prepared in advance to the right people. But that's something that will be dealt with state by state. For more of the laws look like Missouri, but that's not always the case.
I did see a quick question on litigation. Missouri law was 2015 legislation and only has been in effect for a little over a year, so there's no litigation surrounding it just yet.
I'd like to add that, even though there hasn't been any formal litigation, having these laws in place allows a financial institution to, they're going to put this hold or even start this hold. And a lot of the folks who thought they had an easy mark. And there's a lot of just having these laws on the books and having the financial institution able to, put on things and stop things. It just has had a great act, just anecdotally. So shall I move on to federal activities? So, although as we switch over to federal activities, I will say that working with Andrew, Missouri, and then working with a couple of states that have managed to put this law in place, they're very helpful laws, helpful for the senior investor, helpful for the financial institution who's just trying to help that investor, help them save their money for retirement, and be able to help them as they get older. Certain states do have the same ability to investigate or pursue and look into things, and so we've been looking at a variety of ways to help as well. So, if we're not states that manage it, we're looking at what can be done on the federal level, with how we get to a couple of the things that we were looking into. So starting with, I'm going to start with a proposal that came out of FINRA. We have encouraged this is the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, and they want to oversee broker-dealers. So those are those are your Edward Jones, Raymond James, Wells is one as well. Merrill Lynch is overseen by FINRA. So it's part of the whole, all the regulators that are involved, but FINRA is one of them that is involved on the federal level. It's put together, and actually it's moved to the next stage. So it started with something that FINRA put together that goes, before it can become a law, it needs to be approved by the SEC, that is the Securities Exchange Commission. They oversee the activities of FINRA. And this proposal has actually moved to its next stage, and that is being sent to the SEC. What this would do is it would require firms to make a reasonable effort to obtain a name of a contact, name and contact information, trusted contact person. So talked a little bit, made reference to the fact of what is a trusted contact person. It's somebody who you can at least contact and find out, is things okay? Is there something going on here? Is this necessarily somebody who is a beneficiary on the account or is involved in the financial side with that particular person, but it might be somebody who at least say, they're not living by themselves, and then they fell last week, and so they've been in the rehab facility, and there's activity on the account that's not going through the rehab facility. That would be a good indicator to a financial institution that something's going on that's a little bit different here. This way, if you have a trusted contact person, it's somebody that you call, and maybe that's where you get that information. That situation actually in my neighborhood fairly recently, that somebody they had a fall, they were in a rehab facility, there's some going on around outside the house, and some of us who had seen it, we weren't sure exactly where the person was. Now, thankfully, the next neighbor directly next door actually knew where the person was, and had the name of the children of the neighbor, the older neighbor, and so was able to call and confirm that the workers were at the house, absolutely were supposed to be there, and that everything was okay. So trusted contact, it's part of that whole, we need a village to help in all these cases, so that we know everybody's kind of keeping an eye on everybody else. So the piece of it. The other piece of what FINRA's proposal would do is it was similar to what's being done in Missouri. So the fact that you could place a temporary hold on disbursement, there is a reasonable belief of financial exploitation of the customer. And so in terms of the breadth of that could be as broad as a situation where you are concerned they're being exploited because of cognitive decline, or they're just being exploited because of a fraudulent situation. And so it would give us the ability to hold in those situations. So in fact, where it would apply, once the SEC approves it, they'll allow anybody who is regulated by FINRA to take those steps. Going to the slide, well, two bills that are in the current Congress. Two pieces of legislation that we're right now focused on. First one is the Senior Safe Act. It would basically provide immunity to allow a broker-dealer or financial advisor to share information with adult protective services and other investigative agencies. Right now, the law is not as clear on a federal level. There are some things, and really it has to do with privacy laws. So there are some very strict privacy laws in the financial services sector. As a result of that, there's guidance that allows us to, in effect, violate those laws. The law, it's not quite as clear with regard to broker-dealers as well as with necessarily all insurance agents as well. This legislation would make it clear, allowing us to share information with APS and others who are investigating. The law is clear if you're handed a subpoena or a legal document. It's not as clear when it's these types of bodies that are really more investigating, and some of which are social services, just depending on how they're set up within their state. This would make the law more clear. The other is the Elder Abuse Prevention and Response Act. The idea behind this one was to focus on agencies that are involved in this, the Department of Justice and Health and Human Services, getting them involved through additional help, additional resources, focusing on investigating, education, prosecution when necessary. But the hope is that by bringing in more folks who already touch on these spaces, because there's a lot of folks involved in this issue, recognize there's a problem, recognize that we all need to be working together. The idea behind the Elder Abuse Prevention and Response Act is to bring more folks to the table, bring them together. For you who advocate and have some engagement with Congress, these would be two good pieces of legislation to be working towards. We are advocating for them. The Senior Safe Act, we are still hopeful actually could happen this year. These are both bipartisan bills, but the Senior Safe Act has actually gone through already part of the process. It's actually passed the House, but has not yet passed the Senate, and so they are looking at ways to possibly help move it through quickly, possibly during the lame duck session, that is, before the end of the current year.
It probably escaped anyone's attention, but in both what Andrew and Lisa have talked about, the common theme is that folks in the APS law enforcement area are going to have more work to do, but none of these seem to say anything about giving more money to do it. So we'll talk a little more about that in a couple slides, but you can see the is being sent square on both Drew and the regulators, but more importantly, adult protective services and the work in law enforcement aimed at prosecuting and preventing financial abuse.
Hey, Ron. Turn it over to you to talk about how Wells has been Wells has put together.
Sure, about our firm, and it's similar to a number of the firms. We've all cut in this direction, but the idea is firms do it differently, so this will be the Wells Fargo approach. But we've decided to set up a specialized team that focuses on capturing the input from all 50 states. The way you could do this is to put a person in each one of the states or one of the branches. But we like to have all of the calls come into St. Louis. And the team here takes in this information, would have ferreted out whether it's a suspected abuse, who the user might be, or in fact it's one of these diminished capacity situations. Not just elderly, as some of you know, we in states require you to do this for vulnerable adults. These special needs kids we have, and folks are doing wonderful things, set up money for them, special needs trusts. So these become adults, but many times they ask a sibling to be the trustee. Mom passes on, dad passes on, the sibling's now in charge of the money and used as an opportunity to exploit their special needs sibling. So the specialist team helps bring in all of these cases. They see everything that happens, so when they're handling something, it's not their first rodeo. So we think it makes a difference. Me out there in the APS world, I've heard from some of our team members because you've talked to them once, twice, 3 times on the cases that come up in your state. So we part is working out well. We set up the team in 2014 and started with maybe about 90 to 100 cases a month. We're now all above 200 matters a month that we handle and try to distribute out to you folks in law enforcement, adult protective services, and many times to the securities regulators. We've also, in the legislation, the ICE form in case of emergency, so encouraging our financial advisors to use form, have that conversation with the client. We would talk with clients who are 22 or 82. The idea being a 22-year-old could go out in a skateboarding accident, end up being injured. It'd be nice to have that emergency contact for her, but also as you get older, it'd be nice to have the emergency contact for that person as well. And we're doing more training within our financial services forces, so the frontline financial advisors, those who are behind them as client associates or others, we do mandatory training every year for them to learn and identify certain red flags of elder financial abuse, using those red flags to then do the next bullet, which is to know that you have a place within the firm to escalate. We try to tell folks this is not something you try to do on your own. Into the centralized team here in St. Louis, give us the facts, and let's work with getting this matter into the hands of the appropriate professionals, whether PS, whether it's law enforcement, it's the securities regulator. Next slide. I gave a hint at some of these ideas for future thought, but we'll go through some of these and then hopefully we can open the floor for questions. But the first and foremost thing is if we can do more things like this webinar so that all of us in this field get some consistent and effective training. This is a good start. This is an appetizer. But we need to go to the main course. We need dessert. We might need a soup course and a salad course. But there are so many moving parts in this area of elder financial abuse. There's different roles played by APS, by law enforcement, financial services, even others that I haven't listed up there. If we do more of that, do it consistently, do it routinely during a year, we think they make a big difference. We still need to get to a place where, even though we understand the states are all individual, in today's age, it just makes no sense that the way these cases are reported depends on where you are. Some states want a fax. Some states want you to do it by email. Some want you to call a phone line that you have to wait on hold for 15, 20 minutes. It is as simple as going into an online portal, put a name, address of the victim, a couple of facts, and a zip code, and with 3 seconds, that should spit out to the precise desk of law enforcement, APS, everyone that feeds into that zip codes. That needs to happen. That probably will take some federal assistance, which is the next, but we need more and full and predictable funding streams for this work. It needs to be money that goes to APS. There needs to be more money for law enforcement so we can do some special training of officers who focus on this elder financial abuse. Police officers will tell you that the time they spend in the academy, not a lot of it is devoted to this area. They have to show up on one of these calls. Just as easy to say that dispute between the mother and daughter is a civil one, and let me hire their own attorneys and go to court, versus recognizing it for the abusive crime that it is. And the middle bullet is more collaboration. We often have folks go into their corners and point to that evil this person or inadequate that person, but we need to do more of it together, public, private, and non-profit sector. All of us need to try pulling our oars in the same direction so we can root out this problem, prevent, if at all possible, but get swift and rapid and effective resolution to it if, in fact, the crime elder financial exploitation takes place. So with that, I think I should turn it back to you to see if there are any questions or comments from the other panelists.
Much, Ron, and thanks to everybody. Thank panelists for lending us your expertise. I know we had a lot of questions kind of answered along the way, but we have one or two that haven't been. One of them was, do you see these laws encompassing other areas than financial advisors, such as basic banking or in-home mortgage or auto buying?
Yeah, that is the place we should be headed to. Every state hasn't done it yet, and if you know, they sometimes don't like brokers and what have you, but we all should be going in the same direction on this. And you see it in some states next, and we hope to see more and more states put it all together that's more inclusive, whether you're a banker, broker, insurance agent, what have you.
Yes, this is Lisa. We've done some outreach to the trade associations that represent some of these other groups as well, to encourage them to support the efforts that we've been doing, as well as to go or places where the laws can be broadened to encompass banks, insurance agents, that they are pursuing that as well.
I had a question about the concern of big brother, big government, and that this may negatively impact the kind of work that we're trying to do. I think you can't run away from that concern, but I think it needs to be addressed head on. I can say, for example, in Missouri, a law was passed with support from all parts of the community, whether you were in the financial services. There were community groups that were supportive of the legislation, groups focused on seniors like Alzheimer's Association. So we can make it apparent that this is a problem that attacks everybody, that we can say that the solution does require everyone working together, and it does not in effect be big government, but it really is big people, the big community coming together to solve a real problem.
There was a question, too, about who is investigating while the disbursement is being delayed. And, you know, my office obviously investigates every report that we get. The Department of Health and Senior Services does as well. And I think the other thing there is that you know, we've seen, for example, in some of the reports that we have gotten in the last year, that the report resolves itself within 2 days, right? It was I'm thinking of involved the request for money came from a daughter who the financial institution expected it to be a different child, and they were concerned. And, you know, then 4 hours, everyone had sort of huddled up and talked about it, and everybody agreed that it was a perfectly appropriate request. and it went through and, it sort of resolved itself. So I think that, that I read the question perhaps wrongly, that there's a concern that, financial institutions will just hold or delay disbursements for long periods of time for no reason, and I think that that's not in their interest any more than it's in the client's interest. So.
And I'll just echo on that. There are some differences in some of the state laws in terms of who is responsible for investigating. It was actually one of the issues that we were concerned about actually with the NASA model law was that it was actually asking financial institution, putting the burden on the financial institution. Where the financial institutions are out there doing and investigating and doing what they can, but are often stopped at certain places, such as certain places that might be more open to either an agency, an APS worker, or others. So we're hopeful that the way things will work in practice is that there will be a lot of collaboration.
I had one other question. Because of the high probability of exploitation being by family members, would it be beneficial to get more than one trusted contact person?
Point here at Wells Fargo, that is what we encourage our financial advisors to do at the outset. I say the answer is yes.
You answered a lot of questions while we were going through. Is there anything else you want to comment on? Any of your responses? Anybody in the audience?
Yeah, Laura, there's one that's right there that somebody just posted saying they're concerned as a victim advocate and seeing the number of criminal cases coming in when it's complex. What these are there for the victims? So that's part of why we're trying to stop this money before it got out the door, and that's really the real benefit of these hold laws, is that we can stop the money before it goes out the door. The money is there, because it is very difficult to get the money back in these situations in terms of the here, and so it's why we're trying to think of ways that we can be engaged sooner in helping to stop the money before it's out the door.
Well, I will say, and Lisa, the industry organization is helpful in this area. It starts at the beginning, making sure you're working with licensed, registered professionals whom you've researched through the C system, which is a FINRA state-run system that tells you the background. It's easier to be when it's fast free by himself versus looking at whether there's a major institution and backing the alleged claims of the person you're listening to.
Very good point, Ron. And actually, that's a good thing for actually everybody to know about is something called broker check. And that you can just do a Google search on broker check. And that's the way to make sure that somebody is actually registered, regulated, and actually on broker check, you can even determine whether or not any complaint was filed against somebody. I think it's a good avenue for knowing that you're working with somebody who has no claims against them, has a good reputation.
Almost the vast majority of the cases that we see that we are referring to prosecutors for criminal action are people who don't have a securities licensure. We never refer those cases, and it is from time to time. Everyone's heard of Bernie Madoff, but the vast majority of those cases are against people who just don't have a registration and are just, going around using certain buzzwords to sound like a financial advisor.
Laura, I'm glad you guys brought up broker. So we partner with the FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, a lot. They run broker check on their website, which is great. Also have another good resource for people before this is trying to prevent securities and investment fraud. So before there's a designation code, and it's a guide to designation. So if somebody you're thinking of investing with somebody and they have all these letters after their name and you don't know what they are, you can go to their website and look them up to try to see if this is an actual designation, something that somebody went to school for a long period of time to do, or whether this was something that they might have learned in 4 hours on a golf course somewhere. So to try to figure out whether that's that designation, what all those letters mean, to check to see what background they actually do have. That confusing.
And
Other
there's a
questions
question there about asking for materials, educating the community, and I started to actually put in an answer, but the Federal Trade Commission has a great campaign called Pass It On, which is definitely a great education one that folks should think about. And then we have some materials now on our website as well at SIP.org/Senior Investor Toolkit. It's something that we've been looking at pulling things together as well. But those would be two places to start. For the FTC, it's ftc.gov, and it's called Pass It On campaign. But this is all about educating that it's people educated in advance, and that includes scams, all the scams that, I hear about these and learn about them. If people have heard about them before they are approached, they are more likely to question it. So the more we can educate just everybody and educate our seniors in advance, the better off we are.
I'll pitch for state securities regulators. The national organization has created serveurseniors.org, and just every state securities regulator is going to have information on their website as well. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, if Laura could get those websites out to people, just didn't quite get the references. Last thing I would say is that we need to hear, this is Lisa, this is Andrew, this is speaking, but we need to hear from you guys on what it is that they take to continue this struggle so that we get to the other end. I know many of the others on the call see things, hear things, have ideas. It's going to take all of us working together.
And if it's helpful for everybody, I can add an additional slide before we post them on our website with some of the resources we mentioned. I quickly linked to the Pass It On campaign. Lisa, I'm looking for the SIMFA link, and I'm looking for the FINRA ones as well. I think we have both of those in a lot of our materials as well. So our website, victimsofcrime.com, we have a lot of good resources at the Financial Crime Resource Center page. Some of them that we've put together, and some, most of those have many other resources within them that may be helpful. And that anybody wants to ask or mention before we close? Okay, well, thank you so much to the presenters, and thank you so much to all of our attendees. We really appreciate you signing on with us. And I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.